I remember I did not like to read when I was a kid. They used to call me a reluctant reader. I would like to consider myself a super critical reader. I just wanted stories that got like a movie projector going in my brain. And if you did that, if you grabbed me by the first page and didn't let go, then I would devour your book in a day. But if you described the dew on the grass and the emotional feelings of the leaves as they drifted down from the limbs of the tree, you would just be putting me to sleep. So I always try to write for kids who might be like me. And I think there's probably even more now with the advent of video games and handheld devices that can sort of dazzle and quickly gratify your entertainment needs, that I try to write fast-paced fun reads for kids.
Hey everyone, I'm Bianca Schultz from the Children's Book Review, and this is the Growing Readers Podcast. Today's guest is none other than Chris Grabenstein, the multiple award-winning #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Mr. Lemoncello, Haunted Mystery, Welcome to Wonderland, Smartest Kid in the Universe, and Dog Squad series. He also wrote The Island of Dr. Libris, Shine with his wife JJ, the picture book No More Naps, and many, many other books, plays, and audiobook originals. Chris and JJ Grabenstein live in New York City with 2 cats and a lot of ideas. With so many books to choose from, the easiest thing to do was pick his 2 latest books to focus on. So we'll be talking about writing, reading, and his new hilariously profound picture book, No Is All I Know, and the latest book in the Smartest Kid in the Universe series, Book 3, Evil Genius. We're going to jump right into the conversation today, do things just a little bit differently, and I will share the book synopsis ahead of when we start chatting about each of those books. I loved this conversation so much, and I hope that you do too. Well, hello, Chris. Welcome to the Growing Readers Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's good to be here, and let's watch some readers grow. Let's water these readers so they can grow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before we get into talking about your new books, Chris, I loved reading some really fun facts about you on your website. I'm going to share a few. I have them written down here. So you performed with some of New York City's top improvisational comedy troupes, and Bruce Willis was in your comedy group before he became Bruce Willis. And the late Robin Williams, who I adored, would drop by to perform with your comedy gang. So what was that like being in that comedy troupe?
It was fun. Bruce was we were all, you do those kind of things in like basement theaters down in Greenwich Village, hoping that an agent or a talent scout will come by, and you make no money whatsoever. And Bruce was just Bruce the bartender. I was Chris the typist. And, so we were all doing something else to make our money while we did that. And then I think he got cast in an off-Broadway show, which sort of started his trajectory. And then Robin Williams loved doing improvisational comedy. And at that time, this is like the early 1980s, there were only 2 troupes in New York City. And he'd find out where we were performing, and his people, would say, Robin might come by, and word would spread somehow. Word would spread, and suddenly our little basement theater that had maybe 15, 20 people every Saturday night was jam-packed. Don't tell the fire department, with like 100 people. And it was terrific. Robin Williams was the shyest person I have ever met in my life. He would go out on the stage, and the people would be loving everything, laughing their heads off. And he'd come backstage and go, you think they liked it? I said, yeah, you're Robin Williams. They loved it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you've also written for Jim Henson's Muppets. You co-wrote a movie, The Christmas Gift, that starred John Denver, and I live right near Denver. And anyway, that's irrelevant. But
well, they filmed it in Georgetown, Colorado.
Oh, you did?
They did. It was my first script my buddy and I from college wrote, so we didn't write the final shooting script, nor were we invited on the shoot. But I have been to Georgetown since. I think I was out there when I was in advertising on a business meeting. So let's go up to Georgetown, and they've got like quite a shrine to the movie up there.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean, I'm a skier, so we tend to drive past Georgetown a lot. I should probably stop and check it
They've
out.
got a wonderful like holiday market Christmas tree thing, and they have a lot of John Denver like sing along things in Georgetown.
Oh, very cool. And now I'm glad I know that now. Well, you've also written radio and television commercials for many big brands, including food and beverage giants, Burger King, 7 Up, Dr. Pepper, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. And another quick tangent, because this is where our lives kind of connect. I used to be a television extra, and I was in a Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial.
You might have been in one of mine. I
I know.
ran the business for 6 or 7 years in the 90s, in the 1990s when I was doing that. And yeah.
It was the 90s. I was in Australia, so I don't know if they ran the same ads, but yeah, so
Yeah.
fun, so fun. Well, and for the last fun fact, your boss was the very talented advertising writer named James Patterson, and now you write books together, a lot of books.
I think we've done those are up on you can see people can't see, but you can see, and that shelf. We've done 3 dozen books together.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know I was going to start counting how many books you've actually written, and I'm going to tell you the truth. I gave up. Do you even know how many books
I
you've written?
don't really know if you start adding in like I sometimes get asked to contribute to short story collections or essay collections, and it's somewhere near like 6 dozen, I think. So we're in the 70s, I think now.
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
amazing. So, I mean, Chris, who do you wish could see you now?
Oh, the kid who picked on me when I was in the 7th grade, bully Bobby Younger, who almost got his name in a book once because my very first book for kids, there was going to be a bully in it. And I said, well, I'm finally going to have my revenge. That's one of the great things about being a writer. You can finally have revenge on some people. So I'm going to have my main character in this ghost story. My first book for kids was called The Crossroads. And I'm going to have my main character picked on a bully who's going to pick on him the exact same way that Bobby Younger picked on me. And then, because he's a big famous doctor somewhere, I think in Tennessee somewhere. But I'm going to let everyone know that Bobby Younger, when he was a kid, was nothing but a mean bully. And so I wrote it, and my friend, my main character, there's a ghost who helps him. He says, pull down Bobby Younger's pants and show everyone, even though he's 14, he wears big boy underpants because Bobby Younger poops his pants. So I was having all this fun, and I'm writing it all up. Then my mother called me up, and she said, Chris, guess who I just talked to? I said, who? Mrs. Younger, remember her? Yes. Lived down the street from us? Yes. Had that boy named Bobby? Yes. She reads all your books, reads them 2 or 3 times. So I quickly called up Random House. I said, we need to do a global name change. Please change Bobby Younger to Kyle Snertz, or an old lady in Tennessee is going to have a heart attack. So that was that's why I wish Bobby Younger could see me now.
That's hilarious. I was trying so hard not to laugh too loud because I wanted everybody to hear you. That was amazing. I love your voices too, Chris. I have never seen you read one of your books, but I can just imagine that you bring the house down with all of your character voices.
I do live in person. People say you should do the audiobooks. I say, no, I'm too big and broad. My wife is the audiobook narrator in this family because you don't want my voice in your head. I don't know. I used to do I was a disc jockey. That's how I paid my way through college, and used to do funny voices on the radio too.
Yeah, you definitely have that like tone of a radio voice. So, yeah. Well, let's get into writing books for children. I want to know what drives you and guides you in creating books for kids.
I try to remember what I felt like when I was that age. And the first thing, and everything I write, I remember I did not like to read when I was a kid. They used to call me a reluctant reader. I would like to consider myself a super critical reader. I just wanted stories that got like a movie projector going in my brain. And if you did that, if you grabbed me by the first page and didn't let go, then I would devour your book in a day. But if you described the dew on the grass and the emotional feelings of the leaves as they drifted down from the limbs of the tree, you would just be putting me to sleep. So I always try to write for kids who might be like me. And I think there's probably even more now with the advent of video games and handheld devices that can dazzle and quickly gratify your entertainment needs, that I try to write fast-paced, fun reads for kids. And then I always tell other authors that you have to remember what you felt like when you were a kid, not what you did, because kids today don't want to read about, unless you do like a period piece, a time traveling piece and set it. Because, I was a kid in the late 60s, early 70s. I don't think they want to hear about my bell bottoms, but the way you felt when you were a kid, the example I sometimes use is if you were at the chalkboard, which we had when I went to school. Nobody has a chalkboard now, so don't put a chalkboard in your book. But if you were at the front of the class and you hadn't done your homework and you didn't know how to do the math problem because you hadn't done your homework, those props have all changed. But that feeling that you had like, oh, I should have done my homework, and that would still be the same for a 12-year-old kid today. So what I do is I put on, when I was in 6th grade, there was a band called the Monkees. They did Daydream Believer and songs like that were very big. And we used to listen at recess. We used to listen to Monkees music. So I put on the Monkees music and I look at my old pictures from 5th and 6th grade. And I just try to remember how I felt when I was that age.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now I have the hey, hey with the monkeys.
Monkey.
Like,
monkey around.
exactly.
But we're too busy singing to put anyone down. Great lyrics we had back then. Great lyrics.
Exactly. Well, ahead of our chat, I gave you a couple of questions, and something that you wrote back was with your writing, never be boring. And I think that just those simple words it's such excellent advice, especially like you said, when we're competing against technology devices and, kids wanting to make all the TikTok dances. So on the theme of never being boring, I read so many children's books. And what I love about your books is that your writer's voice feels current without sounding like a grown-up trying too hard.
Oh, good.
And so how do you find the right voice? And I feel like you just touched on that a little bit, but if we were to dig deeper, beyond just trying to remember what it feels like to be a kid, what's the secret to finding a writer's voice that isn't boring? And is it just having a really good editor?
No. In my case, it all started. Well, it didn't all start. I probably was doing it originally, but a lot of it stems from those almost 20 years I spent doing advertising. And James Patterson was my boss. He was the executive creative director. I was like the junior copywriter, like the first kids in the door. And they actually had training programs back then. I don't think any corporations do that anymore. They can't afford to do it. But he came in one day to teach us about creative, how to write advertising. And back then he had this big bushy beard. And he came into a conference room and he stood at the lectern, very serious Madison Avenue kind of setting. He said, all right, I'm going to show you, teach you how to make $1 million a year in advertising. The secret is, and before he could say another word, this kind of knucklehead guy came running in the door with a banana cream pie and slammed it in James Patterson's face. And there was custard and goo and crust clinging from his beard, and he cleaned himself up a little bit. And all of us, because we're like new hires, going, he's so fired. He's so fired. And Jim cleaned himself up a little bit and he said, okay, I just showed you how to make $1 million a year in advertising. Throw a pie in their face, and once you have their attention, say something smart. And that's why most of my books start with a pie in the face. Something is happening. If you grab my attention and have something going on, I'll stick around. You can drop in, you can peel the layers of the onion and do the exposition later. It's like, yeah, I want to know I'm in capable hands because this started out with a bang. And he's the one, because when we did advertising, this again, I did it 1984 to like 1999. So DVRs had not been invented yet. So our big bane was the remote control. We had literally 3 to 5 seconds to get the readers, the viewers, the listeners' attention, or they could reach for that remote control and zap us to the next channel, because there weren't as many channels back then. Or if you were in a car and they stopped playing the music that you were really listening to the radio for, and a commercial came on, if you didn't like that commercial, you could push the button. So his advice always was, always write as if nobody wants to or has to read anything you've written, that you have to grab their attention with every word, every sentence, every paragraph. So I always hear that in my head. And I have some internal rules, like in The Smartest Kid in the Universe or a Lemoncello book, the chapters are not going to be more than 500 to 700 words long. And each one's going to end with a cliffhanger, because I come from a theater background too. So, when the curtain falls at the end of Act 1, something happens that makes you go, I think I'll come back and see what happens in Act 2. Because you could go, this is boring. I'm going to go, give me a break here. Now I can go out to the parking lot pretty easily. No one will notice. So you always have to, when you do a play, and someone described, because I've just started doing picture books, every time you turn the page of a picture book, every second page has got to be a curtain riser. It's got to be something to make the kids say, show me what happens next. So there's certain technical things you do, but overall, the overriding thing is don't be boring.
I did love when I was reading Evil Genius, just how the chapters are so short. And as a mom of 3 kids, some nights you don't have a lot of time, but you want to make sure you get some reading in. And just to do one quick chapter and have your kid go, please, please, just one more, just one more. And I love that your books allow that. So it's great.
That's intentional. I put that in. I get a lot of nice emails from teachers if they do read alouds in the classrooms. The kid will go, one more, one more. Then she'll go, it's recess. You get to go out and play. No, read one more chapter. So those are my favorite emails.
Is there anything that you do in your day-to-day practices to aid your creativity that you could share to inspire creativity in anyone listening?
Go for a walk without any earbuds or headphones for 30 minutes. And it's kind of hard to do. There's so many great podcasts like this one to listen to. And I have, so much Bruce Springsteen music I love and books, audio books I listen. So I try to go for a 3-mile walk every day. I used to go running, but then the hips and the knees started saying, no, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So I do try to go for like a 3-mile walk. And what I try to do is not listen to anything for the first mile of that walk. And I got to get back into doing what I used to do when we had a dog, is I'd take the dog on 4 walks a day. One would be in the morning, and that was a great time for daydreaming. And then the second walk would be like around 11:30. So he'd be in the middle of writing and ideas would bubble up. And then the third walk would be at 4:30 when I'm like burned out. I can't write anymore. But I'd find that I start daydreaming and I'd start thinking about what I was going to write the next day. And all through my career, when I was writing for commercials and stuff, walking has been very important. Walking and daydreaming. If you can walk without distractions. I read somewhere that Charles Dickens used to walk for like 5 miles a day. He was quite a walker, because walking, there's something about the rhythm of the pace. And I walk in Central Park here in New York City. So I'm not like sightseeing. I kind of know where I am. I know the trees. I know where the water is. And I'll take time to admire the changing of the seasons. But it becomes almost meditative. So I say go for a walk.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I think that's also why some writers say their ideas come to them once they're laying down in bed. And I suspect that's because that's the first time in the entire day that they have stopped and they're just in their own head without all the input from the world too. So I think having a walk during the day with no earbuds is great advice.
It's very interesting. There was a guy back in my advertising day. I hope I get this right. I think his name was James Webb Young. And they asked him so many times, where do you get your ideas for commercials? Where do you get your ideas for commercials? That he did a semi-scientific analysis and wrote this thin little book called A Technique for Producing Ideas. And in there, he said the first step is to do everything rational that you can, to take in, like if I'm working on a Smartest Kid book, all the research about the stuff I found about ingestible knowledge and stuff, I put all that into my brain. Then you sit down and you write the bad ideas. You write the first level ideas. Then is either the third or fourth step in his process is to walk away from the project completely. Go do something like watch a play, watch a movie, listen to some music, go for a walk, because that gives your subconscious time to chew on and process all the things you put into your conscious brain. And then you will have an aha moment. I always tell my wife, I can't believe I've made my living since 1984, trusting that an idea will pop up about Kentucky Fried Chicken or about Mr. Lemoncello, whatever it is. Like my whole career has been based on trusting that some moment when I'm washing dishes, taking a shower, walking the dog, or just walking, an idea will bubble up in my head. You have to do the homework first. You have to put in all the rational thoughts. But if you trust your subconscious, it will play and come up with a connection that you go, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
There is a saying that you need to be a reader before you can be a writer. And so I'm curious if you agree with that. And if so, was there a pivotal moment in which you considered yourself a reader?
Yes, I think that is absolutely true. That Stephen King, who is I always read his book on writing and Memoir of the Craft. That was what encouraged me that maybe I could go from writing 30-word commercials to when I was writing adult books, 120,000-word books. But he said that definitely. And I think I was a reader, even though I was a reluctant reader. And when I was growing up in the grade that I now write for, like 3rd through 5th, 6th grade, we didn't have books in school. There was a technique or a a teaching program sweeping the country called SRA. And sometimes when I talk at schools and some of the older teachers will start going, oh yeah, I remember that. And there were these big boxes of color-coded essays. The essays were only 3 or 4 pages long. You'd read those and then there'd be 10 to 20 questions, content questions that you had to answer. And when you did enough blues, you got to read the reds. From the reds, you went to the silvers and the golds. So I think they were teaching us how to take SAT tests because that's pretty much the format of an SAT test. So we never read books in school. So my fun reading, and that's what I would encourage, let your kids read for fun. I read a lot of comic books. I was more into the Archie comic books and the Richie Rich comic books. I remember reading Superman comic books too. And I read a lot of Mad magazines, and I still have some of my collection of Mad magazines here in my office. And that's what I read for fun. And I would save up my money all year, my allowance. We'd go to Florida in the summer, and there was a store there called Web City, which was like this goofy department store, and they had all the Mad books, and they cost like 25 cents or 50 cents back then. And I'd have my $5 I'd saved up, all my holiday money and my birthday money, and I would buy like 10 Mad books. So I would think that my teachers would go, that's not reading. But it was reading. And it taught me so much about how to use words, because Mad Magazine was all parodies and satires and taking the stuffing out of people. It was kind of fun. That informed me more than almost anything except Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons. And because those informed me a lot too.
Yeah, watch me pull a rabbit out of a hat. Again, nothing up my sleeve. Presto.
Hand mail from some flounder.
And now we could have talked about so many of your books, but I want to talk about your newest books. So we have your picture book, which is No Is All I Know. And then we have the latest edition of the Smartest Kid in the Universe series, which is Evil Genius. So I'm going to start with No Is All I Know and how it showcases the power of saying yes. And here's the synopsis for No Is All I Know. Do you know anyone like Oliver McSnow who only knows the word no? Introducing a story about the amazing power of yes. This universally relatable picture book about toddlerhood from the New York Times best-selling team behind No More Naps will elicit laughs from kids and their grown-ups everywhere. Oliver McSnow only says no. He says no so much that his no starts to grow and grow and grow until that no is out of control. No baths, no brushing teeth, no cleaning up, no bedtime, morning, noon, and night. It's just no, no, no. But then Oliver's cousin visits. Jess loves the word yes. Yes to friends. Yes to food. Yes to fun. Yes, 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 yes. And suddenly, Oliver's world gets opened up in a most wonderful way. So will you talk us through what readers can expect from No Is All I Know?
First, incredible illustrations by Leo Espinosa. He is so good. He did my first picture book ever, which was called No More Naps, which I did mostly because here in New York City in our apartment building, the folks across the hall that way had a girl named Devin. The folks over this way had a girl named Annalise. I said, these kids are never going to hear their name in a book unless I write it. So I came up with No More Naps about Annalise Devin McFleece, who will not take a nap. And so we did that, and Leo Espinosa illustrated those, and his illustrations were so terrific that I had another idea for No Is All I Know. So we waited till he was available. He's a very popular illustrator. I think we waited 2 years. I think it took 2 years, but we said, nope, we're going to wait for Leo. But that whole story started. First, it's sort of as a companion piece to No More Naps. There's a kid in No More Naps who says, "No, I will not take a nap. No, no, no." And then we started thinking, well, there's kids who say no to everything. I had a nephew once who would never, no matter what you cooked him for dinner, all he wanted was Kraft macaroni and cheese. The stuff in the blue box with that Cheetos kind of powder that you mix with margarine, I think. And we would just make that morning, noon, and night because he said no to everything. And so you take that, and when you do improvisational comedy, there's only one rule in improv, and that is to say yes and. Because if we're doing a scene together, you and I, we've never met before, but I know you know improv and I know improv. I should be able to say, "Wow, it's hot in here," and you pick up the ball, and if I say, "Wow,
I'm
it's
sweating,"
exactly, and then I say, "Well, I told you we shouldn't climb into this dog's mouth," and you'd say, "Well, we're canine dentists. How else are we going to fix this canine's canine tooth? Now, come on, give me the microscope. Oh, I forgot to shrink it." So that's how you do improv. You start with a yes and attitude. And so I thought this was a great kind of opportunity to teach this lesson, because a lot of kids, when they're in that toddler stage, say no to everything. Will you clean up your mess? And we had a lot of fun with it. Leo did some great pictures of, will you get dressed? No. Bad choice to go running out the door without any clothes on. And then when this kid has been saying, "No, I won't go to sleep. No, I'll eat his macaroni and cheese," he gets a little groggy, a little sleepy when his bubbly cousin Jess comes over. And Jess, of course, always says yes. And the hero of our story goes, "Oh, wow. Well, like the little scene we just improvised was much better than if you said, 'No, it's not hot in here. I'm kind of cold.'" And we'd be like, "Okay, well, we got nowhere." Exactly. So, by Jess saying yes, all of a sudden, and Leo did a great job showing where the imagination can go. And so it's really, even though no screams from the cover, it's really a story about the amazing power of saying yes. And Oliver learns that.
And I love that it is really a book about saying yes, but because it has that big giant no on the cover, it attracts the attention of the kids. I've seen it firsthand. It's like, ooh, that's a big no. And then, I read it aloud with my son, who he isn't a big, he doesn't say no to everything, but he certainly says no a fair amount. And he read it along. And every time we got to the no part, I would stop and I would point to the word no, and he would read the word no. And he loved getting to just be free and say the word no, no, no as much as he could. And it was so enjoyable. And then for him to get that realization about how it is better to be yes. I mean, it was so lovely to do as a read aloud with my kids side by side. And I can just imagine story times in preschool classes and kindergarten classes and just how the kids will engage with it. So I think it's so fantastic.
Yes, I've read it out loud a few times in front of kids, and they do start picking up on that no pretty quickly. So
yeah.
And even the end papers that Leo did, where there's one bright green yes in the sea of no's, and your eye immediately goes to the yes, because the yes is, probably because the colors he chose or whatever, but it stands out symbolically as the more powerful word. It can get rid of all those no's with one bright green yes.
Okay, here's what I want to know next. Do you have a favorite double page spread in the book?
Oh, in this book, wow, I haven't there is one in the first book we did, No More Naps, but I love Leo's work is so brilliant because you can go through it like 10 times and see new things. So I think this is probably my double page spread, the one where he's out playing with Jess, and across the pages, the words are very simple, where Jess said yes to everything. But first we see some of the things that Oliver didn't like to do before, like swing on a swing or eat ice cream. Now he's meeting dogs. He's splashing in puddles. He's drawing. I was with Leo yesterday. He tells me the one where he's drawing is his favorite scene, because that's what he loves to do, say yes to everything. So I think that's my favorite, because it just shows like, wow. I mean, literally you open the page and this whole new world is open to you, and all you had to do was say yes.
My favorite double page spread, and it was my son's too, and you sort of touched on this particular spread, is when Mom asks, "Are you ready to get dressed?" And on the one page, Mom's holding up a shirt, and on the opposite page, Oliver Snow can be seen from behind, pun intended, running out the door naked. And I just found it so unexpectedly adorably funny. We loved that page because you just weren't expecting to see this little cutie patootie like running out the door. And I loved that little bit of humor that was added there.
Yes, it gets a big laugh every time we reveal that page. So it's another, again, it's that turning the page, like what's on the other side of this curtain. It is a pie in the face. So all the things we've been talking about.
Well, when a young reader reaches the final page of "No is all I know," what impact do you hope that this book has had on them?
That they might reconsider their options. I tell the story now when I was talking to some kids about it yesterday. When I first moved to New York City, we went to a Chinese restaurant and someone said, "You got to try the cold noodles with sesame." I said, "What is it?" "Well, it's like spaghetti, except it's cold and it's got cucumbers and onions and peanut butter." I went, "Oh man, I'm not going to eat that. What? Ew." And they convinced me to do it. And now every time I go out to a Chinese restaurant, guess what I order? Cold noodles with sesame sauce, because it's delicious. And I can even compare, like, oh, this restaurant does it much better than this restaurant. I've become something of an expert on it. I came from a meat and potatoes kind of Irish, German, Greek kind of family where that's all I ate was my dad. All he wanted was meat and potatoes and put some Heinz ketchup on it. So to come to New York City where you had all these opportunities to try things, and some of them you may not like, but if you say yes, all of a sudden your world starts expanding. So I hope that kids will say, yes, maybe I'll try something besides macaroni and cheese for dinner tonight.
Let's take this moment to move on to the Smartest Kid in the Universe series. And now here's the synopsis for Smartest Kid in the Universe, Evil Genius. Meet middle schooler Jake McCade. Jake became the smartest kid in the universe when he accidentally ate a jar full of ingestible knowledge jelly beans. But what happens when those jelly beans fall into the wrong hands? Readers who enjoy the action of the Last Kids on Earth books will love this fast-paced, spy-packed series that's a rollicking good time, said the New York Times, by the best-selling author of Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. Jake McCade's the smartest kid in the universe. Or at least he was. But just as his training with the secret agency known as the Consortium is about to start, Jake's jelly beans go missing. And to make matters worse, they, and Jake's genius, might be wearing off right when he needs his smarts most. Jake needs to solve this mystery fast. Who stole the jelly beans and why? Can Jake figure out what's going on? Recover the missing jelly beans and stop a high-tech heist before it's too late? From top secret hideouts to New York City penthouse apartments to the Statue of Liberty in the middle of the night, get ready to go on a whirlwind, wild ride adventure filled with supervillains and spies, puzzles and pirates, codes and drones, and much, much more. And don't miss the first 2 books in the series, Smartest Kid in the Universe and Genius Camp. Third book, Evil Genius, has just been released. It's a really fun series that appeals to even the more reluctant readers. And it sounds like you do write these books with the reluctant reader in mind. Is that true?
Yes, always, constantly. Yes, I'm writing for the what I would have liked to have read when I was 10 years old instead of the Red Badge of Courage, which I vaguely remember after we did SRA, we read Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage, written, I think, in 1867. So, it was kind of contemporary stuff.
I don't want to give any spoilers away because we may have listeners that haven't read book 1 and book 2. So I'm hoping that you will walk us through what readers can expect from Evil Genius. And maybe you need to give a little brief backstory without spoilers. I'm afraid if I share anything, I might give away a spoiler. So I'm going to let you sort of talk us through it.
Well, the story picks up with Jake McQuaid, and we pretty quickly reestablished this in the new book. I always try to write my series books so you don't have to have read the first ones to know what's going on. You can pick them up anywhere. Some writing conference I went to early in my career said, if you're writing a series, write each book so they don't have to have read the ones before it, but will want to read those ones too. So you give enough, but not too much. But Jake McQuaid was an average kid, kind of a slacker, went to school because that's where his buddies were, could play video games, played a little basketball, but he was kind of a lazy kid, an underachiever. C, average, that's fine. Average is fine by him. But one day he is really hungry for a meal and he goes to the hotel where his mother is the events coordinator because he knows everybody in the kitchen and they will make him a free meal if mom's working late, but he has to wait. And in the room where he's waiting, he finds a jar of jelly beans, which he does not know are actually ingestible knowledge capsules. He eats the whole jar because he's hungry. And about half an hour later, he's speaking Swahili. So he immediately became the smartest kid in the universe. And that's all established in the first 2 books. But what is always fun with me, because this is kind of my superhero book. It's the way Jake McQuaid ate jelly beans, the way that Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider to become Spider-Man. So it's a normal, ordinary kid who has something extraordinary happen to them and then suddenly has all these new responsibilities because he has all these new powers. But he's always worried that the jelly beans are going to wear off or that there might be dark holes in his he may not know everything. And in this story, the inciting incident is the Hazim Faruqi, the brilliant mad scientist, very funny too. I don't know why he just cracks me and my editor up. Hazim Faruqi is like our favorite character in the books. He's a very funny guy. He has a new jar of jelly beans because Jake wants to make sure I've got some backup in case these ones start wearing off. And someone steals the jelly beans. So the big question of this story is, what if this incredible superpower fell into the hands of someone who wanted to use them for evil purposes instead of good? Because think about it, if you were the smartest kid in the universe, you could probably manipulate the stock market. You could do all sorts of incredible things to make yourself rich and powerful. Where Jake has chosen to save his school, to help his friends, and that sort of thing. So that's where the evil genius, while he's also battling with, are my own superpowers wearing off? Is there someone now who's even more maybe these new jelly beans were even better than the ones that I ate?
Yes.
I hope I gave away too much.
No, I think that was perfect. And I'm glad I had you share it because I probably would have. I love undercurrent of like, will this ingestible knowledge that he has obtained and this power, like, will it just one day not show up, especially when he needs it? And I love that undercurrent throughout because it keeps you just so curious. The other thing that you said was, can just pick this book up and read it on its own. I love that I read from 1, 2, and 3, but you definitely can just pick them up. And here's why I think you're really clever, Chris, is because it's true. Everybody does a little recap in, their subsequent books. So if it's book 2, they recap the book 1. And if it's book 3, they're recapping a little bit of 1, 2. And it can get a little bit boring and tedious. And sometimes like I want to skip through those pages, but with your books, I didn't. I love that it's just, you give just enough so that the reader understands what's going on so they can just pick up book 3 or book 2 or, read them in whatever order. So I love that you just really are so concise, and the word that I want is not coming to me, but you just provide the right amount of information. So I love, and I don't know how you figure out what to include.
Well, you don't want to do a info dump. It's interesting. One year I was judging a bunch of mysteries, and there were a lot of them that I don't know if it was the editor's style or something that had like a first chapter info dump. Like, here's everything that happened in the last 6 books in this series, and now let's start this story. So what you want to do again is hit them with a pie in the face, start the story, get it going, and then drop in the information that they need to know to understand what's going to happen next as your reader needs to know it. It's almost like you're given this information on a need to know basis. Like if I don't really need to know everything that happened in the first couple books, I just need to know what happened in those books that impacts what's about to happen in this book.
Yes, absolutely. And then it sounded like you did some research on ingestible knowledge. Is this like actually a real thing?
Yes, it is. It's
oh
really
my gosh,
really scary. Because I was on one of my walks and I had a goofy idea. I don't know why I was like daydreaming. Might have been close to Halloween. I used to hate when those people would give me Smarties. I didn't like Smarties. Those are those pastel colored
I like
ones that come.
Smarties.
I know a lot of kids, when I say I hate Smarties, will go, they're my favorite. Well, good for you, but I never liked them. I always felt I was cheated. I could have had a little Snickers bar or Hershey's bar or something. But I said, oh, and I remember I did a couple commercials in London and maybe in Australia. We went to Australia. Do you have Smarties in Australia, the chocolate ones?
So yeah, it's like more like an M&M.
M&M,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
So I had those, and I never liked those Smarties as much as I liked M&M. So Smarties were like my least favorite candies, and of all kinds. But I don't know why my brain went, oh, what if you could eat a Smartie though and become a Smartie? What if there was such a thing as ingestible knowledge? So I had that what if, because that's most of my stories start with a what if. And I came home, and I think I just Googled ingestible knowledge, and all of a sudden, up came this TED Talk by this eminent MIT professor. And I believe his real name is Blackbridge, and I call him Negroponte in the book because that's Blackbridge. I sort of the translation. And he had given TED Talks for like 20 or 30 years. And in each one, he would predict something. And he said, well, someday there's going to be you'll be able to read newspapers and books on your telephone. And people laughed at him. And he said, well, someday there will be a device in your car that will help you navigate by linking with satellites positioned in space. And people went, nah, yeah, that's going to happen, buddy. So long story short, everything this guy predicted at TED Talks over the years came true. So they asked him, well, what's the next big thing? And he said, well, I may not be around to see it. It may take 20 or 30 years. But the next big thing is ingestible information, I think he called it. That you'll take a capsule and you'll know Shakespeare. You'll take another capsule and you'll know how to speak French. And the way it'll work, I think I have a copy of this on my website. I think I have a little clip from his TED Talk there. It'll make its way through your bloodstream and find where to deposit this information in your brain. And so I said, okay, that's all I need. Because when you're writing, this is semi-science fiction. You just have enough fact to make your fiction seem plausible. And I did more research about it and found out where knowledge comes from. And there are people working on this. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's just blowing my mind.
Yeah.
I totally thought this was something like completely fictional, but this is crazy. Well,
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say about that, Chris.
Somebody told me that those pills might have nano robots, like those nanobots, those tiny little microscopic. I don't know. So,
You're blowing my mind.
so eat your jelly beans, kids.
Yes. Oh, and that was another thing. All I wanted to do was eat jelly beans. And in book 2, all I wanted to do was eat marshmallows the whole time. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, can you share a highlight from Evil Genius?
Do you want me to read from it or?
Oh, that would be amazing. Would you do that?
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Yeah, because I'm getting ready. We're doing a little book party tonight, so I should be prepared. This is a little piece I've heard yesterday. Actually, the guy, Kirby Hayborn, who does the audiobooks, he did my audiobook for The Island of Dr. Libris, and he was perfect. And I found out he was an improvisational comic. So he kind of knew what I was playing. So he hears my voices completely. So he's much better than I am, is what I'll tell you. So this is from chapter 13 and 14, when those jelly beans go missing. And Jake gets a phone call on his cell at school, and the principal says, you've got to go outside to take that. Jake hustled out of the building and tapped the answer icon on his screen. Hey there, Mr. Faruqi, he said. How was your vacation? Wonderful, until I returned home. Then, boom, I wished I had never gone to Branson or even Missouri. Someone broke into my apartment, subject 1. The sample jar is empty. Someone stole all my new jelly beans. The gerbil spinning the mental exercise wheels in Jake's brain went into overdrive. Did they take anything else? He asked. No, said Faruqi. Not even the very stylish clasp lid storage jar that cost $45. I suppose I was feeling festive when I made the purchase, for I had once again recreated my original creation, or so we must assume. I never did any tests on the new batch. Did you call the police? No, not yet. That's probably smart. Well, subject 1, said Faruqi, sounding a little cranky, if anybody would know smart, it is you. Thanks, of course, to me. Jake closed his eyes and rubbed them with his free hand. What I mean is, how would you explain to the police that someone broke into your apartment and all they stole was a bunch of jelly beans? Perhaps there is a notorious jelly bean thief on the prowl here in suburbia. Who? Cracked Jake. The Easter Bunny? No, Subject 1. The Easter Bunny would not be at the top of my list of suspects. If I understand things correctly, the Easter Bunny has plenty of jelly beans of his own. He grows them in fields of green cellophane grass. So that's a little bit from it. So that's why I love Hazim Farouki. He's just a nut.
I love it. And the way you do his voice is so fun. Now, I don't know if this is a trick of the trade, but I noticed when you are holding the book that you have different lines highlighted. Is that to sort of a little code for yourself for when you're reading, when to switch voices or?
Bingo. Yes, that's an old trick that, I don't know if my wife does that when she marks up her scripts, when she's doing an audio book, but it's just like it's a quick visual cue, like, oh, someone else is talking here. So you don't get lost in the pages.
That's genius. Well, I love it when authors read from their own books. So I feel privileged to have just experienced that. So thank you. I also saw that Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library will release as a full color graphic novel on November 7th of this year, which is very exciting. I'm a big graphic novel fan, like so many kids out there. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, that's an interesting process. We saw that Stuart Gibbs, who's a buddy of mine, did Spy School as a graphic novel, and I said to my editor, well, maybe we should, jump on this graphic novel bandwagon because the kids really love them. And she said, well, will you adapt it? And I said, oh, no, I couldn't do that. No, I couldn't do that. Because I'd done a couple of the Jackie Haha books that I did with James Patterson were turned into graphic novels, and they hired someone to adapt it. They hired someone to illustrate it. But then I said, no, wait a minute. I spent 20 years doing TV commercials, and we did storyboards, and storyboards are just very short graphic novels. And wait a minute. I know the parts I'm going to have, whoever does this is going to have to cut some chunks out because it's going to, it's 256 pages. Not everything is as visually strong as other things. And I know the parts that no one has ever written to me and said they loved. I know all the lines people love because I've gotten it. The book's been out for 10 years. So I've gotten, thousands of emails and read thousands of reviews. And I know the parts people love and the parts like, no one ever mentioned that little trip to the Immigration Hall of Fame. Nice of you to put that in there, but and there's another, like a challenge that no one ever said was their favorite part. So I knew what parts to cut. I said, I will do it. It was almost like writing a screenplay, which I have a little experience in. I studied a lot of screenplay writing when I was in those years where I was trying to learn everything I could to transition from writing advertising to writing whatever I might write next. So I took a lot of screenplay writing classes. And so I wrote the graphic novel as a screenplay. And I have a great editor, Shana Corey, who has been my editor on like 2 dozen books. And we've done so many books together, but she's gotten so good at graphic novels that they've now promoted her to the head of graphic novels. So I had her guiding hand in all this because she knows graphic novels backwards and forwards. And so we went back and forth and we tightened things up because that's what you got to do, a lot of tightening. And it was just like when we did TV commercials where you'd write the really funny bubble of dialogue and then you go, wait a minute, this is a 30-second commercial. That dialogue is going to take 7 seconds. I really need 4 seconds down here. So how can I trim this dialogue down, still keep it funny? So all those old muscles, all those advertising muscles were brought back. And then, boy, they were so great. They got Douglas Holgate, who does the Last Kids on Earth series, does all the illustrations on those to do them. He's in Australia. I don't know if you know him. I don't know if all you Australians know each other.
No, we don't.
The clubs. But he's down in Australia and he took it on and it's beautiful. I've seen the whole thing and it's going to be incredible. They've actually done a few advanced reader copies, but they're black and white. And now on NetGalley, they do have the full color one. So it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. And on the topic of Mr. Lemoncello, you do this wonderful thing where you kind of plant little seeds from Lemoncello within the Smartest Kid in the Universe series. Yes. And I love that little sort of tie-in. And that's obviously a conscious thing that you're doing there.
Yes, it goes back when I was a kid. There was 2 TV shows, those Green Acres and Petticoat Junction. And every once in a while, characters from one would show up in the other. And I don't know, as a kid, I just love that. So that is... we just worked on Mr. Lemoncello's Fantabulous Finale, which is going to be the last book in the series. I think it's going to come out next year. I just finished my first draft. We're going back and forth. But in that one, I'm having loads of fun because characters from The Smartest Kid in the Universe, characters from my Welcome to Wonderland series, The Island of Dr. Libris, all of them are throwing them all in. It's like, this could be our one big gumbo of all the characters from all the different books.
I love it. Well, I had meant to ask you this question before I jumped into Limoncello. So I want to know, what impact do you hope the Smartest Kid in the Universe series has on its readers?
I hope, I put a little quote in the front of this book in the dedication, and my mother didn't say it. I found this quote from someone else, but these were kind of what she thought. And because my mother passed away last January. So this is like the first book that's coming out that she's not around to see, which was, my dad died, unfortunately, before any of my books came out. So this book is dedicated in memory of my mom. And I put a little quote in there that says, being gifted doesn't mean you've been given something. It means you have something to give. And when I was a kid, for whatever reason, I don't know, genetics or whatever, my 4 brothers and I, we were all like super smart. Like school came very easily to us. And my brother Jeff is the smartest one of all of us. He is like that kind of, he could have skipped like grades and gone right to college. He could have been Doogie Howser. He was so smart. But my mother always instilled in us that if you have these gifts and these talents, you don't like lord it over anybody. You don't use it to just help yourself, but we're all here to help other people. And so I hope that when kids read this, they'll say, I want to be like Jake. I want to use whatever talents I have to help other people, to help my friends, to help my family, to help my school. I don't want to become just a greedy grubber like the evil genius in the book. Oh, it's making me choke up a little bit thinking about my mom and kind of values that she instilled in us when we were kids.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because when I read the book, I love reading the dedications, and I was going to ask you about it, but I felt like, maybe I wouldn't. And so I'm just glad that you did bring it up. I think that's special. I'm sorry to hear about your mom, and just overall that message that you just described, it shines through so well.
Good. It's funny, when I worked for Jim Henson, I only got to meet him once. I got to work with Michael Frith, who was one of his geniuses and stuff, but I went to one meeting and we presented our script. It was just like penguins doing something silly in the basement. And he said, what lesson are you teaching? Because kids are going to take away a lesson from this script, whether you put one in or not. So make sure you have one that you want the kids to take away. And so that's always stuck with me too. So what do I want kids to take away from this? Because when you're writing for kids, it's kind of it's valuable. What you're doing is valuable. You don't want to be putting bad thoughts into kids' heads. So I'm hopefully, and at the same time, you don't want to be didactic, and like, this is what you should learn from this young man. You want them to absorb a lesson almost without knowing that they're absorbing something.
Yes. Well, your books definitely do that. So, Chris, this has been so much fun. And if I was to choose one takeaway for listeners today, I'm going to go with the power of saying yes. And that is because I want listeners to say yes to grabbing copies of Know Is All I Know, The Smartest Kid in the Universe, Evil Genius, and every other book that you've ever published. So thank you for sharing your wisdom, wit, and wonderful thoughts on writing. And to steal words directly from James Patterson, and I hope that Mr. Patterson does not mind, Chris, you just might be the smartest writer for kids in the universe. So thank you for being on the show today. I think you're amazing.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet of you. Thank you so much. This is a lovely discussion.
Thank you so much for joining us on this quest for growing readers. Be sure to check out our show notes. You'll find links to order a copy of Chris Grabenstein's Know Is All I Know and The Smartest Kid in the Universe, Evil Genius. You can visit Chris at chrisgrabenstein.com. If you like this show, remember, you can hear it on Apple Podcasts, Chromecast, Spotify, or anywhere else you enjoy listening. Subscribe to the show to get new episodes as soon as they launch. If you're enjoying our book chats, please leave us a review. And while you're at it, tell some friends to come and have a listen. The Growing Readers podcast is a production of the Children's Book Review. To find more books just like the fun books written by Chris Grabenstein, I hope you'll visit us at thechildrensbookreview.com.